First, they came for coal-fired power. Now the net zeroists are coming for the family car. Influential think tank, the Grattan Institute, is pushing a zero-emission standard for all cars, vans and utes 2035. That is an effective ban on petrol and diesel vehicles in less than 14 years' time. According to the Grattan Institute, it's the only way, they say, to reach net zero emissions by 2050. But have a look at some of the fine print. The Grattan Institute's Energy Director Tony Wood says that relying on market forces alone to decarbonise Australia's light vehicle fleet is therefore a risky strategy that could well lead to millions more petrol and diesel models on the road in 2050. In other words, Australians don't want electric cars and won't buy them without massive government subsidies. We've heard this story before, haven't we? Solar, wind, now it's electric vehicles. They're all toast with our taxpayer billions. And consider this statistic from the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries. In the 6 months to the end of June, more Australians bought gas-guzzling American utes from car makers like Chevrolet and Ram than bought electric cars. Plus, sales of conventional utes, think Ford Ranger or Toyota Hilux, well, they've hit record highs, eclipsing 100,000 in the half-year stats for the first time. Those numbers speak for themselves. Make no mistake, this net zero agenda is about so much more than the environment. It's about making sweeping changes to the way ordinary people live their lives, the car they drive, the food they eat, the number of children they have. Who's got the guts to stand up to all of that? All right, for his take on all of this, the latest car push, when we're in broadcasting legend, my very good friend, Alan Jones. Right, Alan Jones, is there any issue on which there is a greater divide between the green left elite and mainstream Australia?
Peter.
Look where people are putting their money. They're putting it into big cars, not a Tesla.
Peter, this is just so much rubbish. Look, can someone just read the reports from the International Energy Agency? The director there, Faith Birrell, says, if you think you're going to change climate by bringing into the production electric cars, she says, then think again. Now, the first thing that has to be said about this nonsense is the electricity that will enable the car to move will predominantly come from fossil fuels. Secondly, the manufacture of the electric car will actually, the energy to manufacture will come from fossil fuels. And the International Energy Agency says, now this is a very important statistic, I think, and it says, if you then take the average time in which people will use a car and it has a limit of 400 kilometres, then you'd have to go 60,000 kilometres in that electric car to pay off the energy debt. As a result of that is the difference between the carbon dioxide emissions, which won't be emitted because it's an electric vehicle, as opposed to the carbon dioxide emissions that have been used in generating the electricity that runs the car and in making the vehicle. You'd have to, this is the International Energy Agency, not me, Peta Credlin, the International Energy Agency, you'd have to travel 60,000 kilometres to pay off your energy debt. Then, of course, you find in countries like Norway, where there is the greatest use of electric cars, the subsidies are mammoth. And again, the International Energy Agency says the average subsidy per electric vehicle so far is over $24,000. And they have argued that this is an indulgence for rich people. In other words, the rich people can afford an electric car to make them feel good, and they've got another one in the garage, and they're getting all the subsidies at the expense of the poorer person who can't afford an electric vehicle. Oh, I can't believe we're heading down
here.
Hey?
I've got a long memory. I remember when Josh Frydenberg, I can remember when Josh Frydenberg put $100 million of all of our money, taxpayer money, on the table for Macquarie Leasing to provide subsidies for electric cars. And the ticket price of those cars at the time was well and truly over $120,000.
Correct.
This is not your struggle street cars.
Correct, Peter.
This is the problem.
And
when the battery goes on these cars,
that's
we're
the
talking
battery
about
as well.
35,000 to 40,000 to replace it. Now who?
And where do you bury the batteries? Where do you bury the batteries? Where do you bury the batteries?
Can you imagine a pensioner paying $35,000 to replace a battery? That's an expensive trip to the garage.
Good on you. Good on you. You're on the right tram, Peter. This is another hoax. Another hoax.
I want to go. I want to go to another topic.
Yes.
It's all about trust. Only 4 in 10 Australians trust the media. We're in trouble. This is a new survey. It's the Edelman Trust Barometer. It shows that just 41% of Australians trust the media. That's down 10 points in the last 6 months. That's compared to 52% who trust the government and 80% who actually trust their employer. So the boss is actually coming out of this pandemic quite well. Journalists down, commentators, or maybe we might fare a bit well, I'm not a journalist, I'm a commentator. Politicians, public servants, they're all in the nose. Why is it then, Alan, with COVID, we've lost trust?
Yes, it's a very good question, Peter. Look, well, firstly, I think politicians and public servants, they certainly have lost trust. One of the problems, and I'm not saying this to defend the media, you and I are in the media, we are in a very, very difficult position here because a cancel culture has interfered with things here, and people in the media who want to say something and prosecute an argument that may be inconsistent with that articulated by government, and it may be inconsistent with that articulated by the big pharmaceutical companies, then they run significant risk of being cancelled by big tech. So in many ways, I mean, Silicon Valley is running the show here, and there is now this awful combination between big media, big politicians and big tech, and the average bloke is really compromised in terms of what he or she might say. I think we have never been in a more delicate period of our life where it's essential that the plurality of the media be given its full expression, and we have faith in the public to make judgments about what they're being told and what they should listen to and what they should not listen to. But that's not the case at the moment. I mean, coronavirus, there are a whole heap of controversial issues about lockdowns, about vaccinations, about ivermectin, about whatever. And here we have, governments like in Queensland who make it a criminal offence for a certain medication to be prescribed, when a Liberal government should say, listen, personal freedoms represent personal choice. Let people work these things out for themselves. But those notions have left. So obviously, if media continue to sprout the argument of government, then people will put them in the same category as government where their credibility is not particularly high.
Hey, now, look, last night I read a tweet to say that you were headed back to breakfast radio in Sydney. Now, I thought this must have been something wrong, or I'd missed some big breaking story, but there you were this morning. I even had a listen. First time ever, Kyle and Jackie O, I listened. I tell you, you don't like a sleep in, do you? Breakfast radio back in Sydney, how did it feel?
Oh, well, look,
Put your sea legs back?
It was most enjoyable. Look, people have said to me, are you going to go back into radio and whatever? And you and I have talked about this a lot in terms of what we're going to do, what are our vocations. I simply say, which I suppose Paul Gallen, the boxer, says, put a piece of paper in front of me and I'll tell you whether it's yes or no in a handful of days. I don't know. I don't know where I'll be next year. You and I are enjoying what we're doing now, but who knows what the future might hold. But I'm not saying no to anything and I'm not saying yes to anything. I enjoy the prosecution of ideas, and I think that is essential in contemporary society.
Well, we're all the richer for it that you still love to get out of bed and do it every day. Thank God for you,
Peter.
Alan Jones.